SHRM thanks Gap International for sponsoring this episode of People and Strategy. As a trusted partner to global leaders for nearly half a century, Gap International works with organizations to deliver superior performance. Gap drives transformational change by focusing on mindset shifts and performance breakthroughs. Learn more about our long-standing partner at gapinternational.com.
Welcome to today's episode of People and Strategy. I'm your host, Mo Fatalbab, President of International Facilitators Organization. People and Strategy is a podcast from the SHRM Executive Network, the premier network of executives in the field of human resources. Each week, we bring you in-depth conversations with the country's top HR executives and thought leaders. For today's conversation, we are recording live from the Visionary Summit in Austin, Texas, at the SHRM Executive Network Conference. And I'm excited to be joined by Anita Martin, CHRO of the Houston Texans. Welcome, Anita.
Thank you, Mo. Excited to be here. And short drive, so I'm great.
We are excited to have you.
Yes.
So, Anita, you have an amazing role that I'm sure many people covet. I would love to know how you got there.
Well, that's interesting. I grew up a fan of professional football. I've been watching professional football since I was 8 years old. I never thought about working in sports.
And what was your team then?
So I grew up a fan of the other Texas team.
Oh, boy.
There's a whole story behind that we don't have time for. But how I came to this role was, one, having a network of peers who knew who I was in HR Houston, knew I was a huge football fan, knew the team that I rooted for. And one of my peers actually worked at the Texans. And when the Texans decided several years ago that they were going through an organizational change, they upskilled the role and said, we need a VP of HR, we need someone with strategic HR experience to come in. And so she called me. She's like, you like sports? This is what you do. And at first I was like, I don't know, one, because of the team, one, in my loyalty. But what it was an opportunity for me. I had been managing my career progressively upward to finally sit in the seat as the head of HR, to be at that table, to not only be there, but also influence. And so that's what I had to focus on. I looked at the role and not necessarily where it was. So it wasn't about me working in sports and being a part of the team. It was about the role and what I would be able to do and go in and change and help change the culture of that organization.
Okay, we're going to talk about changing culture in a second, but first, tell us more about your role so that we can understand all the wonderful things that you do as CHRO of the Houston Texans.
Yeah, so one of the things that surprised me, like I said, growing up being a football fan, my biggest decisions, when it came to sports and what sports was coming on live TV and thinking about it is, okay, what am I eating for the game? What food am I going to have? Is it going to be wings? What adult beverages are we going to have, right? Not really thinking anything beyond what you see on TV on Thursday night or Sunday or Monday. But then going into the organization and realizing that it's a business, just like every other business that I've worked in. There's marketing, HR, IT, legal, finance, sales, all of that. And so it surprised me, going in there and saying, this is really no different than where I've worked before, what I've done before. And so it was a little bit of a mind shift, for me, understanding that, yes, this is sports, but at the end of the day, it's still a business.
Does the seasonality of the football season affect your role in any way?
So during the interview process, I was told that my season as an HR, professional, our team, we would have an off season when the team started playing, because we would be using the off season to prepare for the season to start. Well, that hasn't actually been true, right? There's a lot of preparation that goes into getting ready for a season. And you would think that once that's done, the season starts, everybody can kind of sit back and relax because, hey, you've done all the planning. Well, that hasn't happened because, again, we still have people working every day, still having to deal, with those issues. And then looking at the physical year is different. It's not a calendar year. So there is no downtime. I joke with my peers all the time. I said, you guys told me I was going to have an off season. I haven't had one yet. So it doesn't affect Us in our department, we get a little more excited during the season, but other than that, we are 365 days just like every other organization.
Anita, you're presenting a session here at Visionaries called Lessons Learned, Transforming HR Departments from Tactical to Strategic. You've helped 3 companies transition from tactical to strategic. Can you walk us through those changes and what you did?
This is my 4th role that I have gone into an organization, been asked to come into an organization and transform that organization from being administrative and tactical to being more strategic, to being more of a partner to the business. It's what I've done. It's not something that, I thought I was going to do when I got into HR. I had no idea that this is where I would end up. This would end up being my sweet spot. But I have the ability to actually go in, look at an organization, look where they are. What do they want? When they talk about strategic HR, does that organization even know what strategic HR means, what that looks like? Is the organization set up for it? So that's what I've done. This is the 4th role. I've gone in, assessed the organization, looked at policies, looked at processes, and most importantly, looked at the team, looked at the HR team. Do you have the team in place to be able to move from being tactical and administrative to strategic? So that's, I kind of give people, walk them through my journey, over these last 10 years that I've done this.
And for those that may not know what you're talking about, can you give us a little bit more of a definition of what strategic HR is?
Right, great question, because that's the first question I always ask the leaders when I walk into organizations. What does that mean to you? Yeah. When you think about tactical versus strategic, a lot of it is about making sure that you're using the right words and the right vocabulary in HR. When you think about tactical is more administrative, being more reactive versus being proactive. It's usually things that, you can get accomplished in a day, in a week, in a month. When you talk about strategic HR is looking at the entire employee life cycle, from recruitment to retirement, if you will, and everything in between. And when you look at recruiting, is it about just posting a job and getting people into an organization, or is it about talent acquisition? Are you looking at not only, attracting the best talent, but how do you retain them? Do you have the processes in place to retain talent? Are you competitive? Are there career paths? Is there career development? Is there coaching? Is there mentoring? You look at total rewards, benefit, how people are paid. Do you have a compensation structure in place? How are you paying your people? What is your compensation philosophy? Do you look at market trends? Do you want to lead the market? Do you want to lag? Do you want to meet it? So all of those are the things that when you think about HR, just on the surface, people don't really go that far into it. They think that HR is about just hiring people, bringing them in, and then, if need be, firing people. But there's so much more in between that life cycle, from recruitment to retirement, whether it's on, they decide to, or, like I say, we like to promote people to fans.
Yeah. And succession planning obviously is part of the strategic HR process.
Succession planning is absolutely a part of strategic planning. And again, that's going in and looking at the organization. Mm-hmm. One, is the organization set up for that? Mm-hmm. Talking to your leaders, understanding, is your successor here? Mm-hmm. If they're not, what do you do? And then, having those uncomfortable conversations with them about what does that look like for you? What is that timeline, for you? And that's probably been one of the most uncomfortable conversations I've had to have with executives, to say, hey, kind of, be honest. What are you looking at? Yeah. Right? Because again, having to look at the organization. Are you here for 5 years, 10 years? If you're not, we need to start looking at a plan. And it's not about replacing you. It's about making sure we get the right person and having that opportunity to then, that tribal knowledge. Make sure that that's passed down so that, there's some continuity in the organization.
We always talk about you could just get run over by a bus. What happens if you get run over by a bus?
We like to say win the lottery.
Okay.
Try to be a little more positive.
That's more positive.
People,
I like that.
Run over a bus, like win the lottery. And,
Yeah. So I want to talk specifically about the role of HR and perhaps the CHRO as it relates to culture change.
Yes.
So what is it that HR's responsibility? What is HR's responsibility in that regard?
That's a good question, and you can kind of look at that a couple of ways, right? Because a lot of people tend to believe that HR should not be the drivers of the culture, but we should be more so the keepers of the culture. And I tend to look at it a little differently, because when you look at HR and our role and who we are accountable and responsible for, we're the people. And what drives the culture? It's the people. So if you want to take a back seat and say, we'll let the organization decide what the culture needs to be, as an HR professional, you're not doing that organization the best service in your role. My role in that is helping identify, establish the culture. What do we want this organization to look like? When a teammate or an employee walks in every day, what do we want that person to experience? What do we want them to take away from here every day? How do they feel? Do they feel valued? Do they feel respected? And when you have the business functions, they're focusing on numbers, they're focusing on marketing, and how much of that goes into the culture. You have people that are in the marketing department, in your finance, in your legal, that's driving what that looks like every day, their lived experience. So HR has to be a part of defining, or if you walk into an organization that already has a very well-established culture, making sure you help, sustain that. What can you do, or how can you even help make that, that culture better? So I don't believe in HR kind of taking a back seat and saying, it's really not our job to drive the culture. It absolutely is our job to not only drive it, but even in this case, in the role that I'm sitting in, I've actually helped change it.
I love that. Speaking of culture, is the culture different on the field than it is from the back office?
It depends on, what day it is and if we win, lose.
Win, lose, right?
No, one of the things that I've been appreciative of is our head coach, a lot of how he reacts and how he looks at his players and what he expects, from them and what he's building over on that side mirrors a lot on what we, want and expect from our teammates over on the business side. Basically it boils down to we want, good teammates. We want people to be good teammates. We want them to be good teammates not only in the organization, in their families, in the community. And there's some of the same things that we build off of over on the business operations side. So it's we don't yell at our teammates when they make mistakes, or there's not half times where we have to go in and readjust, but it's pretty much it's the same, and that's been one of the surprising things over the last year and a half, that we are looking at mirroring the culture on both the football side and on the business operations side, because at the end of the day we're all there for the same thing, and that's to get those wins on Sundays.
There you go. I love that. So how do you deal with employees and teams that don't embrace these cultural shifts, or that, how do you create the buy-in?
A term that I will use, and I'll have to say that I can't take credit for it, is having strategic patience, right? The first thing is, I've built my HR career on 3 pillars. That's fairness, consistency, and transparency. And when you talk about culture and getting people to buy in, transparency is absolutely key. People have to understand why. They want to know why. Why are we changing? Walking into this organization when, it was told to employees that we're going to be different, but coming from our ownership, we're going to be better, that meant that we had to change. Yeah. And they wanted to know why. What we've done, we've been here, this organization has been around 20 years. Yes, we've had some good seasons, some bad seasons, but why? So getting them to understand that what got us here 20 years ago is not what's going to keep us going within the next, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So one, making sure, first of all, that people understand. And they understand where the organization is going, and then understanding their role that they play, that it comes from top down, but you have a role in this organization and in this change. And if they understand that, then people have a choice. You can either say, I've been with the organization, this is, what I'm used to, you guys are going in a different direction. I don't want to be a part of that. It's not aligned with who I am. It may not be aligned with my values. And then sometimes conversations have to be had. You'll have some, employees and teammates that will say, okay, I'm on board. And you will have some that say, that's really not, for me. And so sometimes you have to have those hard conversations with people to say this may not be where you need to be.
Yeah. What advice would you have for other companies that are about to undergo a similar change?
The first thing I would ask, every organization is the change necessary? A lot of times you'll have situations where there'll be one or two things that'll pop up and, leadership will all of a sudden be on, fires like, oh, we need a cultural change. We need to do things differently. You need to make sure that you are not changing for the sake of change, or because there's something that's come out now and it's like, oh, well, this is the way that organizations is going. This is what the trend is saying. Does that make sense for your organization? That would be the first thing. Because again, making change for the sake of change, you're not going to end up, where you are. And then you need to understand that change takes time. It takes time. It is not overnight. Having a strategic plan in place, here's where we are. Here's where we want to go. Then how are you going to get there? And then most importantly, understanding that it's a journey.
Yeah.
It is a journey. You may decide that, yes, this is where we want to be, and it takes you 3, 4, 5 years to get there, and then things have happened. Yeah. The world, may have changed. Your business may have changed, and now you're looking like, okay, we have to shift. We have to pivot again. So understanding that it is a journey. And I don't think any organization will ever be to a point where this is who we are fine with this, and we're never going to change. We're never going to do anything differently. Understanding it's a journey and that it's okay.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
So something that strikes me as I hear you say that is I think a lot of us were forced to deal with change during the pandemic.
Yes.
Have you seen that affect how people are more willing or less willing to make change since the pandemic? Have they become more willing to make change?
I think they have been, because they understand that we didn't think we could. No one expected us to be in that position, and we did. We pivoted on a lot of things. The work from home. Yeah. That has been the biggest thing that has come out of COVID, that organizations have been able to see that we don't necessarily have to have everyone in the office every day. Yeah. We can change. I've worked in the oil and gas and, working with skilled labor, punching, clocks, people, having to punch clocks in and out. But there are other, positions in an organization that you don't necessarily have that. You can have people working, remotely. And so I think when people saw that, with something as major as that came in and we were able to change and we accepted it, that, you have to look at everything now. And yeah, change is possible.
Change is possible. Something else you said really caught my attention. Strategic patience.
Yes.
What is that?
So strategic patience is, and I'll talk about it in terms of, where we are in our journey here with the Texans. Again, it was a well thought out plan. We have a plan in place that we knew it wasn't going to be 1, 2 years, 3 years at least. And there are things that we put in place. We as executives, we have our whiteboard. Here's what we want to happen. We have our timeline of when we want things, to happen. One of the big things that we did in this organization is compensation and behavior were not tied together. And that is something that we have done. Coming from my background and working in oil and gas before sports, one of the things that I would see all the time is that you would have top performers, very smart people, very intelligent, able to get results, but they pissed 10 people off in the process. No one wanted to sit with them in a lunchroom. And so behavior mattered. And so that was one of the things, coming into this organization that has said, yes, we're going to tie behavior to compensation.
And how do you do that?
So with the total reward. So prior to me coming in, bonuses, you looked at bonuses and how they were distributed. There was no process in place. It was discretionary as to who got it, how much they got, and what really sort of woke me up was I started with the organization in April, and it was the start of their fiscal year. And they had just finished all of their compensation so that everything went into place as of April 1. In middle of May, I had a VP come to me, wanted to talk to me about an employee that he had been having some issues, with. And so again, I'm, a little over a month in, and he comes and he's talking to me about all the issues that he's had with this person. And so I'm taking notes, and I had looked up her, her file. She had just got a very nice increase on her base salary, had got a very nice bonus. So I'm like, wow, what could have happened in a month and a half? So when I asked him, I said, well, how long has this been going on? And he said, oh, this has been going on for years. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking and I'm saying, is this the same person that you just gave an above average increase to, that you just gave a huge bonus to, but you've been having these problems? And so they weren't focused. They were focused on results. And what I said to them, and then eventually to the broader organization, is that there has to be an incentive for people. There has to be a tie. And again, you can come in and be the best employee we have, the best teammate, but how you behave, how you show up every day, how you treat your teammates, it matters. So we have a compensation structure now that people are evaluated every year on not only meeting their functional goals, but what we call their habits, how you behave. And it's 60-40. So what you get depends on meeting your goals and how you meet those goals and how you treat your teammates and how you show up every day.
So 40% of the bonus is the how, and
Yes.
60% is the what.
Exactly.
Amazing. I love that.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that. Okay, ready for some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right, here we go. What's the one word to describe your leadership style?
Ambiguous.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Clarity.
When you were a child, what job did you want to have most?
I wanted to be an actress in New York City on Broadway.
It's not too late.
I know.
If you could master any new skill instantly, what would it be?
Singing. Because that's one of the reasons why I didn't pursue my passion of being on Broadway, because I'm not the strongest singer. So if I could all of a sudden reach the levels of, Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, I'd probably be on Broadway right now.
All right. Well, my fingers are crossed. I'm not giving up on you. Anita, last question. What is the one piece of advice that was given to you that has shaped you either personally or professionally?
A little bit of both. My mom, one of the things that, my mom, had me focused on was to focus on best, not better. Growing up, not growing up with a lot of means. One of the things that she would always, say, it's not about you being better than someone else. It's not about you dressing better or you living in a better house or, having better things. It's about you being your best. And every day when you wake up, when you walk out of this house, make sure that your best self is walking out of this house. Make sure that everywhere you are and everything that you do, you are showing up as your best self. So that has shaped me both professionally and personally, that I don't get into looking at what someone else has or what someone else is doing. What am I doing? Am I being my best self every day?
We all need to remember your mother's lesson. What a valuable, valuable piece of advice you got. Well, and that is where we'll end it for this episode of People and Strategy. A huge thanks to Anita Martin, CHRO of the Houston Texans. You can follow People and Strategy podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also, podcast reviews have a real impact on a podcast visibility. So if you like today's episode, please give us a review so you could help others find the show. Finally, you could find all our episodes on our website at shrm.org/podcasts. Thank you for listening and have a great day.
SHRM thanks Gap International for sponsoring this episode of People and Strategy. Learn more about our longstanding partner at gapinternational.com.